All right, welcome everyone to the October 10, 2022 meeting of the Black Mountain Town Council. And it's our pleasure this evening to have Cheryl Wilson with us for our prayer. Cheryl is the executive director, as many of you know, or most, probably everyone knows, of the Swananoa Valley Christian Ministry, and she's done a great job for a number of years, and she is retiring in early December. And I don't know how they'll manage to replace you, but I'm sure they will. And we appreciate your service over all these years for our community. And so thank you for coming here this evening. Would everybody stand?
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we are in awe of the beauty that surrounds us, and we are blessed to live within these beautiful mountains. The changing of seasons and the glorious colors are magnificent. Thank you for our town leaders and our town employees who make Black Mountain such a great place to live and for our tourists to visit. Please keep them all in your watch care. Guide the leaders in their decision-making for this community we live in. Bless each person and give them the wisdom, courage, and forethought to continue making Black Mountain such a wonderful community to live in. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and be seated. I would, as a matter, I'll just use it as a matter of an announcement, but to ask council for a slight change in the agenda, not anything that we're planning on covering at some point in time tonight, but a slight change in the agenda just to formalize it a bit. I would request that under new business, we add F, which would be a discussion of salary of the recent salary adjustments, salary and wage adjustments for part-time workers. Does that sound like clear enough to everybody? And then G, EFG would be a discussion. It's not just a discussion. Let's make it not just a discussion, but just to scratch that word, but for F. But then for G, the item on the agenda would be personnel and wage changes in public works.
Yes, that's correct.
That'll work. That sound good? Does that make sense, Savannah? Yes. So, council, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the agenda change.
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, no. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, council, that you have an obligation to disclose any financial interest that you have in any topic that comes before us this evening. If you may not be aware of one now, but if one comes up during the meeting, or if you think you might have one, stop and let's talk about it. And otherwise, unless you have a financial interest, you're required to vote on all matters brought before council. I have this evening, I'm going to read the proclamation first, Chief, and then we'll bring in the presentation from the League of Municipalities. This is a proclamation for Indigenous Peoples Day. Whereas the town of Black Mountain recognizes indigenous people have lived upon this land since time immemorial and values the progress our society has accomplished through the contributions of the indigenous people's culture, and whereas natives and non-natives have shared this community for hundreds of years, and the indigenous people have provided friendship, guidance, and protection, and whereas the idea of Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas, And whereas the town of Black Mountain wishes to recognize natives with the day to celebrate and honor indigenous people to better reflect the experiences of indigenous people and to hold in esteem their roots, history, and contributions. And whereas the town of Black Mountain wishes to preserve and promote the history and culture of all indigenous. Now therefore, as the mayor of Black Mountain, I declare the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day in the town of Black Mountain, and encourage continued recognition, appreciation, and celebration of our goodwill and friendship with our local indigenous peoples. I strongly encourage community members, schools, businesses, public and private organizations, and other community partners to join communities across America in recognizing and promoting the well-being and understanding of the contributions of our indigenous communities, proclaimed this, the 10th day of October, 2022. Larry B. Harris, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you. And the council member drew this to our attention, and we've added that in. We did not discuss it at the agenda meeting, but we didn't need to. But thank you. Thank you, council member Hay, for drawing that to our attention. And we give thanks for all of our indigenous peoples who live in the valley and in western North Carolina in particular. So thank you very much. Thank you. So we have a presentation this evening from the North Carolina League of Municipalities Law Enforcement Risk Review to the Black Mountain Police Department. And I believe we have Matthew Selves with us to do that. And so, Chief, I assume you're going to come up and join us. And it would be good for you to sit, and
Okay.
we'll get you up front for a picture.
Oh, great, that's what I was hoping for.
Later.
Thank you. Thank you again for that announcement and that recognition. My name is Matthew Selves. I am the Public Safety Risk Management Consultant for the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and thank you, Mayor Harris and Black Mountain Town Council for this time in recognizing the Black Mountain Police Department for completing the Law Enforcement Risk Management Review Program. Now, the risk review involves a very comprehensive agency review of high-risk policies, operations, and practices that includes a detailed on-site agency administrative and operations review, including looking at equipment, facility inspections, officer interviews, ride-alongs, observations of operations, all to validate that those practices align with policies and in turn with industry's best practices. We specifically look at the high-risk liability areas within a department, like police operations of vehicles, response to active resistance, evidence processing, employment practices, procedures, training, in addition to many more categories. There's 39 categories in all that we cover that when we're looking at this. This review is supported by the North Carolina Associations of Chiefs of Police, and I'm proud to report this evening that the Black Mountain Police Department has successfully completed the law enforcement risk review process with the League. The chief, the command staff, and the department officers prioritized this initiative, made this process a departmental priority. The department was very proactive and involved in the process the whole time. I want to thank Chief Parker, Captain Kuhn, and the department's command staff for their leadership and their willingness to participate in this very important initiative. They were very open and transparent during the whole process. Now, I myself have spent 25 years in law enforcement. I was a police chief for 12 years in a town, Troutman, North Carolina, in Iredell County near Lake Norman, and have worked with a lot of agencies across the state. The officers that I've worked with, just like the Black Mountain Police Department, have observed and demonstrated a very high level of commitment to the communities and in best practices, enhancing police professional and positively impacting the communities and those relationships. We have a plaque to present this evening to the chief and the town and the police department. It's recognized as the Black Mountain Police Department for completing the law enforcement risk review process, proactively serving the community in a professional manner, and taking steps to minimize risk to citizens and officers. Presented today, October 10th, 2022.
Great. Before you stand up and we get some, give a chance for some photographs, I wonder if any council members might have a question for either one of you, just to help the public understand a little better, or or help them understand a little better.
I don't have a question, but I do want to say thank you for initiating this. I remember you told us when you came you were going to do it, and you were going to do it in record time.
Yeah.
And you knocked the ball out of the ballpark, so thank you.
Being very proactive in this, some of the technology that you've upgraded with the department has made it very easy for myself to get the part done too. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but this department moving ahead is in the right direction.
Right, right.
How often does the department or should the department participate in this process?
Okay, the process, like today's the completion date, the first risk review, the second process will happen in 3 years.
Okay.
So we look at it in 3 years because, as you know, in the past 3 years, policies have changed throughout the state and the nation. So we just got to keep up to date, and we communicate all the time. And I want to also recognize the chief. I asked him to serve on the North Carolina League's Chiefs Advisory Committee. So he'll be taking over one that's retiring this year,
Great.
starting next month.
Great, congratulations, Chief.
Congratulations to it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, got the plastic off the plaque.
I got it off.
All right.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
I'm thankful to receive this for the department, but I really want to say that Major Kuhn, Lieutenant Staten and Lieutenant Kidd and Sergeant Feinberg really made this happen. I was just a catalyst that started it, but the real work and the grind, I got to give them all the credit, especially the Major. He did an amazing job in some of the software stuff, so I just really wanted to thank them for their efforts and was hoping that they could come up and take the picture.
Sure,
as well.
yeah.
Yep, yep.
Bring them on up. Well, all right. We're politicians, so you know, why not?
That's right. Come call it on the table.
I'm gonna say afraid.
A lot of people.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're on to citizen comments, and if you wish to make any comment about any item, we don't have any unfinished business, but any item of new business, you might want to hold that because you would have the opportunity later. But otherwise, feel free to come up. When you come up, you give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes. Marion, Kamenetz, I'm sorry. Kamenetz.
Thank you.
Meeting you on Wednesday.
Yes. Good evening. Thank you for your opportunity to address the Town Council. I'm Marion Kamenetz, residing at 360 Genesis Circle in Black Mountain. As a representative of the Friends of the Community Garden, a member group of the nonprofit Black Mountain Parks and Greenways Foundation, as well as a volunteer in the community garden, I'm making the strongest possible appeal to allocate a portion of the ARPA surplus to augment the garden manager's current wages with vital and critical additional hours for 2022 and 2023. At this time, the garden manager has 165.5 hours left on her contract, which ends 12/31/22. This request is to increase that number to 240 hours, which would be an additional 75 hours. At the current wage rate of $18 an hour, this would mean a request for approximately $1,350 for calendar year 2022. According to an email I received from Councilmember Hay today, he assured me that in his discussions with Town Manager Harold, who met with the garden manager, that he is, quote, confident we will be able to support her work through the remainder of the year. My hope is that we can move this position to full-time with the next budget cycle, unquote. Thank you both for your commitment to this support. Given that the next budget cycle doesn't begin until July 1, 2023, and it's not likely to have the full-time hire on day one of the next fiscal year, I'm requesting ARPA funds for January 1 through December 31st of 2023 to augment the garden manager position to full-time hours. If the current hours per week, 19, is increased to 40, it would be an additional 1,092 hours, and at the wage rate, it would be $19,656. So this request is for a total of $21,006 in ARPA funds for the garden manager's wages for the calendar years 2022 and 2023, and this calculation does not include benefits or other amounts that a full-time position might require. The community garden, whose mission is to grow, educate, and share, is a highly valued and treasured Black Mountain resource. It is a unique jewel in the town's crown. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, which states the value of the garden in a nutshell. It provides the needy with food, donating 4,000 to 6,000 pounds of produce annually to Bounty and Soul that go to over 700 families per week. The garden's support is more crucial every day as the number of needy continue to grow in this economic climate. Eating nutritious local foods accounts for increases in healthy families, which in turn decreases the amount of illness and disease in our community. The garden also provides a place for local gardeners to rent plots to grow their own produce, as well as involving a myriad of volunteers to harvest the donation plots, care for the perennial fruit, nut, and berry trees, and educate local school groups and adults in the importance of resilient agricultural practices. This in turn increases human feelings of self-worth, positive outlooks on life, better understanding of how people are connected to plants and the earth, and how they can serve themselves and others. These positive aspects should not be underestimated. They are what builds strong individuals, strong communities, spiritually, mentally, and physically.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I cannot read the first name. Miss Workman. Your first name, I apologize.
Billy Joe.
Billy Joe. I knew the Joe was in the middle, but I couldn't get the first one. Thank you.
I'm Billy Joe Workman, 307 Genesis Circle, and I'm here to complain about our garbage pickup. He leaves mine like once a month. If it isn't sitting on the street just so, and I'm not the only one. And the truck driver drives off, and he's still pitching bags in the truck. They go under the truck, bust open, and he's just driving on. And also, I'm wondering why you have to have white or black bags. I live by myself, and I can't fill up a 13-gallon trash bag. And I did recycle Ingalls bags. And anyway, I just wondered why we can't. They have to be black and white.
Thank you.
Black or white.
I'll ask the town manager to follow up with you.
Okay. Like I say, it's several of us that, like one was walking his dog and he picked up the poop and put it in my garbage can, and they didn't pick mine up because the little tiny green bag was on top of my garbage. Yeah. I had nothing to do with it, but thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
Weston Hall.
Weston Hall, 100 Port Main Villa, Black Mountain. I just want to say, since the police are up here, just shout out to the police. I've taken a lot of classes with them, or a few classes with them, and they've always represented Black Mountain well, and just wanted to convey that. Not many people get to see that them in that type of setting, and they definitely represent us well. I wanted to talk tonight about ARP and kind of echo what Miriam said. I won't be able to put all that in there, but definitely we need to have a full-time position. It has grown dramatically at the community garden, and it's just too much for one person to do part-time. We need a full-time position. And I see a place where we can have a barn and cooking classes, and I mean, our culture has moved to an urban setting, and a lot of children don't know how to garden, they don't know how to cook fresh foods, and this could be that. A lot of the calls I go on when I'm a firefighter are diabetic calls, and if we can help change children's diets, I mean, what impact that would have. And a full-time position could very well do that. We could have people from Asheville schools coming in to Black Mountain to learn about gardening and the way to do it right. So I wanted to say that. And then also, if we could form a committee on ARP, I think it would lend to transparency. They would look at, make sure we're not missing any zeros, and also can weigh some of these items so that we know we're going to get the best out of our ARP money. And we don't want to duplicate anything, so if we can get a grant for something, then we don't want to spend that money on ARP, or we don't want to waste our ARP money on that. So also, firefighters are still getting $14.88 an hour. We were told they were going to get $15, but they didn't quite get there. And I would just like to recognize that they are not getting $15 an hour. And if we can give our public works that go into our sanitation when they have to go over to that department, then we give them a hardship allowance for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane McCall.
I'm also speaking on behalf of the community garden.
Address.
I am Diana McCall at 12 Blue Ridge Assembly Drive. The town of Black Mountain has set the example for community gardening in the region, state, and even the country for nearly 3 decades. The town now has the opportunity to continue to lead the way by making the community garden manager a full-time position effective immediately. As we have few comparisons to make for a full-time paid community garden manager position, I invite you to drop the word garden and consider that the average salary for community managers in the U.S. is $66,000 per year. In 2007, the community garden manager had 20 hours per week to manage less than 20 gardeners, 2 community partners, and a few hundred volunteer hours annually to meet the mission to grow, educate, and share. Physically, the garden included around 3,000 square feet of production and around 10 perennial shrubs. Today, the community garden manager uses the same 999 hours annually, manages over 100 gardeners, including Spanish-only speaking members, 10 to 50 unique volunteers on a weekly basis, an internship program, multiple volunteer task groups, including composting, marketing, and fundraising, 2 distinct budgets, 3.5 acres of annual and perennial agriculture of over 100 species, a second community garden at the library, and over 25 affiliations, including Bounty and Soul, Warren Wilson College, North Carolina Community Garden Partners, Asheville Youth Missions, and partnerships with numerous local businesses. Job skills require excellent spoken and written communication, conflict mediation and facilitation skills, as well as excellent systems creation and management. The skills needed to grow food are secondary to the skills needed to engage, develop, and support the community. Thus, why I recommend you think beyond the simplistic associations of gardening and consider the community management aspects of this role. Keep in mind this position also used to be supported by a full-time staff person in Parks and Recreation. the Health and Wellness Services Administrator, a position created in 2005 and left unfilled since 2018. What's possible when we value community leadership at the level of fire and police leadership? We build an approach to community safety and well-being that isn't just focused on reactionary measures, but also resiliency measures. Community gardens provide not just physical well-being through increased nutrition and movement, but also mental well-being through increased belonging and community safety networks. Community gardens provide safe places to process trauma, grief, and depression, as well as essential skills education. They also build resilient networks among individuals, businesses, associations, and institutions that...
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
You have some on the back too, Mayor, if you didn't see those, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Diana was the last one on the back. And we had one that looked like scratched through.
Thank you.
The slot. Scratched through, so I assume that's all. Did anybody sign up?
I did. Rodney Wolf. I signed up on the back page of the first, back side of the first page.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rodney. Forgive
That's
me.
okay.
Yeah, come on up.
That's okay.
I skipped right over you.
That's okay. That happens all the time. Hi, my name's Rodney Wolf. I live at 10 Silver Lining Drive off Pagetown Road in Rainbow Terrace Townhome Association. Our association is directly across the road from 621 Pagetown Road, which has been in disrepair for years and needs to be condemned. And the owner given the opportunity to take care of it. It's a safety, a health. We are now getting rats in our community from across the road. I was out today surveying the area to find out what I needed to work with our in-demand lawn care, and one right across the road in front of me and went back over to the house. Probably 50% or more of it is collapsed. There's been no efforts to fix it. There's trash along the road that's been there for months that no one's picked up. And it's just an eyesore. It's a safety issue too for kids that play in the neighborhood that might want to go in the house and see what it is and see what they can do. The association would like for the council to do something to take care of this. And I've been told by the association if something's not done, we're going to look at other avenues to remedy the problem. And that's basically it.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. And Josh, if you'll put that on your...
It's actually on new business.
Great. Oh, okay. So we are ready for communication from staff, councils, and commissions, and let's do this. Let's start with the annual stormwater report, and Jessica Trotman and Ann Phillip.
Oh, yes, helpful. Good evening. So this is our first stormwater utility presentation since you suffered the 90-minute proposal of starting it in the first place. So I promise this will be more fun and not as long. Not clicking. There we go. Just as a reminder, stormwater in Black Mountain does not exist in a vacuum. We are one of many MPDS communities and utilities in the state, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but just starts back in 1970 when the EPA came online in 1972 when the Clean Water Act was adopted. All these regulations come from the Clean Water Act. Everything in blue from 2020 until now has happened under our effort to deal with a notice of violation from the state and how we've responded to that. These are just a few select accomplishments that we are happy to share with you. We'll talk more about these in the presentation, but the utility has the town's first dedicated stormwater staff, our lovely Ann Phillip, who joined us almost a year ago. We've improved our billing process and schedule. We've worked on accuracy of assigned tiers. We've streamlined payment methods. And we've been recognized by the UNC Center for Environmental Finance for being a successful small town stormwater utility. And I was invited to participate in a panel discussion, and we've actually been interviewed for a book on how to do it. So we must be doing something right. The program has funded a lot of progress in a short amount of time, including fully remedying our notice of violation with the state, funding the stormwater master plan. We have 2 stormwater control measures underway and 1 more getting ready to start. We've implemented our requirements for the permit and has been so busy all over town with illicit discharge violation investigations, holding workshops in the community, and working with our friends over at Public Works with activities and with Parks and Rec with stream cleanups. I wanted to note just a couple of common misconceptions that we hear about stormwater utility and stormwater in general. One, a fee versus a tax. This is not a tax. It is a fee. It is a service that the town provides in order to be compliant. It's not as straightforward as turning on your tap and water coming out, but it's the same idea. Some folks think that the stormwater utility is only used for infrastructure. That is not true. The stormwater utility is first and foremost dedicated to being compliant with our regulatory concerns, which are wholly related to water quality. Also, there is a concern about an impression that maybe the stormwater utility can cover the cost of big infrastructure projects. It cannot. Our stormwater master plan that you were introduced to and adopted last month has over $17 million of projects in that. We're not far over $300,000 in revenue a year, so that's a big difference. Developers don't have to do anything with their stormwater. Yes, they do. And there's a nice little graph to show you that. Under this permit that we have, developers have to have post-construction stormwater plans for their property dependent on the size. The stormwater system is intended to hold large rain events. It is not any more than the river can hold all of the water and have a flood. A level of service is around 10 to 25-year storm. We often have 50 and 100-year storms. And sometimes there's an impression that because the storm system may be overwhelmed in a large rain event, that the system is failing, but it's not. It just literally can't hold all the water. It's not intended to be able to hold that amount of water. We have done a thorough assessment of sub-basins and our stormwater infrastructure, as you saw in the awesome maps and hydro studies and the master plan from last month. We have also been starting to assess the condition of our open and closed systems. That's going to be a long process, but we will also be spending money from the utility to do a full assessment of areas that we can't reach in the next couple of years. Some folks don't like ditches, but our engineers really love ditches because they move huge amounts of water. They have opportunities to slow velocities, have opportunities for infiltration that are not available to us when we have a closed system. Also, we live in the mountains and water does not go uphill, and so we cannot have a pipe going down every street because we cannot pump water back up the hill to get it where it needs to go next. So there are points where the system regularly has to terminate because of topography challenges. And we can't put them everywhere. And the other is that the stormwater department holds this permit. This is the town's permit. Every department has responsibility to this. We are all engaged in this. And whether it is understanding where we wash a truck or being trained to be aware of illicit discharges, it is everybody's responsibility. We just help take care of it. So there are 3 major parts to a stormwater program. You have your funding mechanism, you've got your permit, and then you have the customer service to the community. So I'm going to talk about the utility, and then Ann's going to talk about the fun stuff about what we do with the money. Just a reminder that this is a requirement of the permit. You have to have adequate funding and staffing to manage the provisions of the permit. That's one that they like to remind us of. So where does it go? A utility is predictable. You can model it. You can respond to changes in the community. You can understand how you're going to do capital planning, deal with environmental issues, and a regulatory environment, which is always getting more stringent. The idea of the MPDS permit, when it first came out, is that we would eliminate stormwater pollution altogether, and then in like 10 years. It turned out that's not true, but the idea is that every permit cycle, you become more close to that goal. These are our current tiers. This is called a flat tiered model, and it's based on general intensity of use of a parcel. It is not the most elegant solution, but we had a shoestring startup, and this worked. Distributions by tier, this almost perfectly mirrors our development patterns across town. We are largely 1 and 2 family homes. You can see we had a little bit of an uptick in that category in year 2, and also in the undeveloped in the gray, just from people subdividing a piece and creating a new undeveloped parcel and building a house on the other. Our stormwater funding by source, so it's going to take us a couple of years before we see regularity across these budgets. But in year 1, we billed $355,000, and that's the big blue. But we also had permits and reviews and a late fee. The late fee contributed $6,203. We did not have a late fee this year, but it was in effect in year 1. In year 2, we billed $359,000. And we have an $84,000 allocation from the general fund. We also have fees and permits and some grant funding in there as well. Billed versus collected. So in year 1, we had $355,000 billed. I'm squinting, but without the late fee, we had $313,000, and then when you consider the late fees, almost $320,000. So far this year, we have received $129,000 of the $359,000 the billed. It's going very smoothly this year. So here are some just examples of where the money goes. The highest priority is our regulatory compliance. We have dedicated staff, and we are starting this program from scratch, so we're tooling up. We have to have water testing kits, materials, rain jackets, safety equipment. We have matching funds for a stormwater project on Terry Estates. We funded the stormwater master plan, and we've done some genetic testing of some things in the river, and that is also very interesting. We've also increased our level of service over and beyond the permit, so because people do not experience compliance, people experience service. Anne is doing site assessments. She's being a great resource to folks. We have engineering and construction of 3 stormwater control measures at various stages of development right now. We have a tree giveaway program, and Public Works just put in a rain garden because this permit becomes ingrained in the culture of our practice and across departments.
Wait, can you go back to that slide?
Yes, ma'am.
What, the engineering and construction of 3 new SCMs, what are those? Tell me more about those.
We're going to see some pictures of them in just a minute, plans and all the fun stuff. These are just teasers. So expenses by type. In the first year, this budget was developed before we were done even completely assigning tiers and knew that we were going to do a master plan. So the goal was to have about $100,000 in fund balance. We have about 160, and that's because we decided to hold back project money until the stormwater master plan was done. So we will be allocating that money to projects soon. You'll see in year 2, we have more colors happening. So we have a significant increase in staffing costs. That's with finance's help, we were able to help more accurately reflect what it takes to administer this program across departments between Public Works, Finance, Administration, and things like that. And you see there's $7,000 for a zero match grant that we had. $78,000 is related to the 3 SCMs that are going in. So it'll take a couple of years before these all start to be very predictable. But we're getting there. There's the 2 years and just that incremental increase. And appeals and corrections. So we knew the first year that we were working with limited data sets to develop the assigned tiers. And so when you got your invoice, you were able to say, no, that's not right, and send us the correction. And we would make an assessment if that was accurate or not. The vast majority of these were folks who have a nonprofit or like a church or something, and believe they were tax exempt, but this is not a tax, so the exemption does not apply. This year, you can see we've had very few, and it's just, we've really been able to increase the accuracy of our billing data set. Things we're looking forward to from the utility side, allocating that fund balance into new projects and determining if we want to do that through matching dollars for grant applications, pay as we go, or debt service. These are questions we'll be talking about through budget next year. Really quantifying indirect investments that benefit from other town departments and nonprofits that we partner with. Modeling new rate structures for your consideration next year, as well as complementing credit programs for those structures. Every year I have to do a fiscal gap analysis for the permit and against compliance, but then we'll also do that against capital planning. And then the most exciting this process will be fully over to the finance department. It started entirely in planning. We are planners, we are not finance folks. And then we got one foot into finance and next year the whole thing. So it's been a process and it's taken a huge lift from everybody, but that will be the last piece for that. You have questions so far on this piece?
Council, questions up to this point?
Rockin' and roll.
Are there plans to adjust the tier structure? You said it was pretty basic right now. Are we looking to make it a little bit more complex?
You will have proposals through budget cycle because it has to be done through the budget.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And now it's Anne's turn. And do you want to switch?
Sure, yeah.
So my name is Ann Phillip. I'm the stormwater technician here at the town of Black Mountain. Very nice to be here presenting our program to you. My main job is to implement the NPDES permit for the town and also respond to community needs. So we'll start with what is an NPDES permit. So it stands for National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And MS4, it basically just means we have a stormwater system, so municipal separate storm sewer system. We don't have a combined sewer like some cities do. We have a separate storm sewer. And one of these permits is required for every MS4 owner or operator in a U.S. Census Bureau designated urbanized area. And you can see on the map at the top, those are all MS4 permit holders. And basically, this is administered directly from, or most directly from the North Carolina DEQ, but it ultimately comes from the EPA. It is a federally mandated program. The permit period is for 5 years, at which point we renew and we have another permit that is good for 5 years. This permit has 96 items included, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. The permit requires a stormwater management plan to implement the permit requirements for each year of the permit cycle. So this is kind of breaking down the number of requirements there are in the permit. So we have permit year 1 through 5. Each has a blue and an orange bar. Blue is the number of activities that are required in the permit for that permit year. So year 1 has 43 permit activities. The orange bar shows the audit details. So there are 90 questions about those 43 permit required activities. So you can see year 1 is very busy, and then we're building on each year as we move forward through year 5. So everything that we do in year 1, we set up the first year, I set up the first year, but then we will continue to do it every year after that as well. So we had the choice last year, 2021, that was last year, to either commence a stormwater program and be in compliance with the DEQ, or we risked failure to comply, which comes along with fines of tens of thousands of dollars per day. So federal fines of up to $37,500 per day per violation. After 10 business days, we would be up to the revenue that we have for our stormwater program. So I think it was a good choice that we get something for that money through the stormwater program. There are 6 minimum control measures of the permit. So this is how the permit is kind of broken down. And I'll go through each of these with a slide just now. So the first is public education and outreach. This is maybe the most publicly available piece of the permit. It's where we partner with nonprofit partners to engage the residents of Black Mountain in different workshops for stormwater management on private property. So we had a workshop about rain barrels and about rain gardens, also about live stake implementation and giveaways as well. Public involvement and participation is a little bit different. So this includes input from the public during our community survey last December, January, that also informed our stormwater master plan update. We have stream cleanups, which is a partnership with an internal partnership with Parks and Recreation and Parks. There's Clint there up on the right. He leads these stream cleanup events, and I've been supporting his efforts doing that and talking about water quality as well. So far we've had 9 events in year 1 with 65 volunteers. A lot of them are the same people come back repeatedly to clean the streams, which is really neat. We also are collaborating with 2 college classes, one through Warren Wilson and one through Western Carolina University, to support the stormwater program, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And site visits to businesses and residences. Another piece is illicit discharge detection and elimination. So basically an illicit discharge is anything that's not stormwater or groundwater or anything that's basically natural water going into the streams and surface waters and ultimately the Swannanoa. So I've had 43 reports of illicit discharge since November 2021 when I began working for the town. And in doing those investigations, I found basically 16 or roughly 37% of those resulted in further action. So that could be anything from sending letters requesting remedying of the situation and starting the notice of violation to just immediately remedying the situation or referring to partner agencies like the Army Corps of Engineers, Buncombe County Erosion Control, and Buncombe County Environmental Health. And then on the right here, you see Western Carolina University students doing some water quality sampling with their class. They are sampling at sites. Most of the sites that they're doing are also dovetailing with sites where we partnered with Mountain True to do eDNA testing. So one other piece of information is that the Swannanoa River is impaired, and it's impaired for 2 parameters. One is benthos, or the community of organisms living in the bed of the stream, and also fecal coliform bacteria. So we wanted to start asking these questions: well, where is the fecal coliform coming from, and how do we eliminate it? So Mountain True has done some eDNA testing for us, essentially environmental DNA in the water, and coming up with conclusion that the source is human waste, not dog or swine or cow or pig. So we will be pursuing that further. This is just very early days, but it's kind of exciting, so we put it in this report. Even though we don't have all the data figured out just yet. Construction site runoff controls. Now, Buncombe County Erosion Control is the agency that does the enforcement for erosion control. So they do that for any size parcel. So if anyone has concerns about construction site runoff, they can contact me, and then I contact Buncombe County Erosion Control, or they're also welcome to contact Buncombe County directly. We have now an additional land disturbance ordinance to prescribe environmental erosion controls like the sediment fencing for projects that don't result in hard infrastructure. So something like just doing grading instead of doing new development has a land disturbance ordinance along with it. Post-construction site runoff controls. In the town of Black Mountain, we have one of the most stringent post-construction ordinances in the state. 5,000 square feet of impervious addition. So that could be new construction, that could be additional construction, could be a parking lot, could be a house, whatever it is. 5,000 square feet of impervious now triggers a post-construction stormwater permit. Statewide, it's the metric for the threshold is an acre. Other towns municipalities do different things, but ours is one of the most stringent. We have 100 post-construction stormwater permit sites. This means they were required to construct a stormwater control measure. So there's a little breakdown there. It's commercial, also SFR, single-family residential dwellings, and then some different residential developments, either small subdivisions with shared SEMs or a subdivision with an HOA. And you can see in the graph there, the number of post-construction permits has increased along pretty linearly. And then I have pollution prevention and good housekeeping. So this one actually has a lot of different pieces to it. I inspect town-owned facilities, including we have the Public Works building and the fire station building have their own permits. I do quarterly inspections of the facilities and also visually monitor the water quality coming out of the outfall from each of the facilities. In permit year 2, I'll start with dry weather outfall monitoring to see if there's any illicit discharge happening. You can detect it when it's not raining. And then leaf collection, street sweeping, keeping spill kits in buildings, and maintaining our whole system all fall under this one category in the permit. This is just a number of inspections. So like I said, quarterly inspections of the 2 facilities that have their own permit. And then SEM inspections, the town has 11 of our own town-owned SEMs. And this is looking at the number of site visits I've done, excluding regular inspections. So I've done 60 outreach visits to residents, mostly to see if there's anything I can do in the town right-of-way to help alleviate their stormwater issues. And if that's not the case, to be able to provide some resources for them to be able to address their private property stormwater mitigation. And as I mentioned before, 43 illicit discharge violation site visits. And these visits result in work orders. The most common is clearing of a block culvert. Then we've got clearing of a ditch. So these are things that have to be done constantly. And since I'm out there doing these visits, we're generating a lot of internally produced work orders versus complaint-driven. And I hope this is helpful to everyone in town, just having more eyes on the issues out there. So these are the new projects that we mentioned earlier, this Terry Estates Stormwater Project. This is a new SEM at the Terry Estates parking lot, just north of the Public Works building. The purpose is to put in green infrastructure. You can see there at the green bars, basically to act as a filter for the stormwater that comes off the parking lot, carrying pollutants like oil and grease and copper from the brake pads, and allowing it to settle in and filter out in those green infrastructure pieces before it goes right to the river, which is very close. Right now, it just goes into the storm drain and right to the river. This was a large project that we were able to take $51,198 from the utility, and with matched funding, be able to afford a $130,000 project. This is another project on Black Mountain Ave. This is a collaboration with the railroad. To date, they have added some check dams to the west of Black Mountain Avenue, just south of Sutton there, to keep debris from going and clogging the culvert that goes under Black Mountain Ave. This is a proposal to manage more stormwater by having the stormwater be diverted into a stormwater wetland, which is indicated by all those dots right there. We actually have this, we've received this woody debris removal grant from the NC Department of Ag. It's STRAP funding, which is Stream Flow Rehabilitation Assistance Program. $7,000 was awarded. This was a zero match. We have a new rain garden, like Jessica mentioned. Public Works responded to public comments about water sitting in the area near the greenway on the community garden side. And we're able to install a rain garden to manage this with green infrastructure, which not only will help with the water issues, it will also improve water quality before the water reaches the river. This is a new one, Lake Tomahawk Biocell, between the parking lot just south of Lakeview Center, and Lake Tomahawk. Again, the idea is to make a living filter for taking pollutants out of the stormwater and also cooling the water before it reaches Lake Tomahawk. And with this one, we will be partnering with RiverLink to do an installation workshop. And I just want to mention that if anyone wants to know about anything upcoming with the stormwater program, there's a stormwater notification on the first page of the town website. It says notify me, and then you can sign up for stormwater alerts so you can learn about these workshops. We have a tree giveaway coming up this Saturday, 9 o'clock in the Terry Estates parking lot. This is to assist with stormwater mitigation on private property funded by the stormwater program. And things to look forward to, advancing projects from the new stormwater master plan. Now we have a stormwater master plan that we can use as a document to understand which pieces we can do with what amount of funding. We can also, we're going to move forward with making progress towards solving the source of the fecal coliform in the Swannanoa River. It could be septage, could be sewage. So we'll be moving forward to figure that out and developing innovative stormwater treatment and conveyance projects, expanding community-based activities to improve water quality, especially with high school and college students, developing additional programs for residents in partnership with Parks and Recreation. I'm really excited about that. I want to have places for people to plug in so they can start to build their knowledge base about what they can do on their private property. And then we are going to have the older town-owned SCMs basically looked at by engineers to assess their state and be able to rehab them. And maybe less exciting, the 62 requirement activities of permit year 2 will be happening next year. These are our partnering agencies. There are kind of a lot. It's, as Jessica mentioned, internally, we're doing this interdepartmentally to manage the stormwater permit, but we also have external agencies. I just want to thank you all for your time. I know that was a lot, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for all your work. Council, some questions? Any questions?
I have a, excuse me, those filtering projects are interesting. Is that required, or is it just sort of to meet the overall goal of trying to reduce sediment and other materials that are going into the rivers?
The latter. So it's not required by our permit, but the point of the permit is to reduce our stormwater pollution, and really it's that non-point source pollution, the sheet flow of water moving over man-made structures and picking up pollutants that is our, right. That's what we're trying to help with water quality improvements, yeah.
I think it's a great presentation. It really highlights a lot of issues. It's a lot of work, obviously.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the work we've done in just a year. It's pretty incredible. What would you say is the greatest cause of the pollutants that we're finding right now? Like, is it cars and automobiles on man-made structures, or is it erosion?
Well, it's interesting. It's a mixture. I would say erosion is certainly one of them. And statewide, that's the #1 pollutant. I know that to be a fact. In town, I don't know what's our primary pollutant, but certainly that is one that could happen. Sedimentation from that's why we have these post-construction and construction requirements. Then you've just got your normal everyday stuff like litter, waste oil on the ground. I think, less often are these intentional introductions of pollutants into the waterways. Often I don't think people understand that, the storm drain is leading directly to the river or the stream, whichever case it might be, without any treatment. So it could be that it looks like a way, and it could be just well-meaning, but not understanding the implications of doing something like that. So, yeah. I'd say it's a mixture of things, to answer your question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just thank you so much. You've done a great job in a year. A lot of good things coming too.
Thank you.
So I have a few questions. A couple of years ago, I'm thinking, I may be wrong about that, but we passed some, we passed some requirements that if you disturb, I'm going to use that word, there's a more planning-like word that you all use, but disturb piece of property, you know, this much, you need to have these sort of mitigating factors built in, which is a big list of them you can use. And then the bigger piece of property, you know, the more our ordinance, if that's what it is, requires. So how does that tie into, because it's a pretty big deal, because that's just any house, anything that goes on, commercial development, whatever. So how does that fit into our plan?
So the post-construction requirement of this permit is that very thing. That ordinance is the manifestation of that
All that
post-construction
stuff.
requirement of the MPDS permit. It sets forth what it has to accomplish, and then it shows up in the form of an ordinance.
Great, thank you. So I did have a question, and this came up as an aside at a meeting not that long ago, but when Public Works, which is, they're the ones moving stuff around whenever it needs to be done, digging holes and putting pipes in the ground if we can find pipes, they're documenting, they're keeping records that you need for your, you know, to show that you're, you know, following your plan, doing different things. So I'm wondering how that is, how that's going, what your perception is, and what sort of, I understand, I'm not being critical of it, but it is just extra, it's an extra work. It's an extra step in what they're doing, already strapped for time and labor. And so what's your assessment of that project? Because anytime they do any work that's associated with stormwater management, you want the records on what they've done, and I don't know how detailed it is, but could you speak to that just a second?
I can, and Ann can jump in too. The permit actually is painfully detailed. So if you were to have an inlet that was a third full with sediment and you needed to clean it out, you're supposed to report how much, like what is the volume and the nature of what you removed from it. It's remarkable because they're trying to quantify the impact that it's having. So there's some metric of reporting that. And it does create extra work for everybody. Using iWork, I think, has been really helpful. That is the software that we use to create work orders, and everything can be filled in the field in one place. So that work orders generated, and that data about how many people were involved, how much time they were, how long they were there, what materials were used, and if they had to haul anything off, can be captured there. But it certainly does add work.
So I'm curious if we're capturing, because that's time, that costs something.
It does.
Are we capturing that, and is that stormwater, is our stormwater utility covering some of those costs?
It is.
Yes, and I think that will get more refined the longer we do it.
Right.
But yes.
Right,
that
because
is.
it seems to me that you almost need a person to do that.
You do.
Frankly.
So
I mean, that's a tremendous amount of work. The crews are out there doing things, and to tag that level of detail, and I'm not debating whether it's useful, but that's just something we're going to have to pay attention to, or that's just too much to dump on these folks.
That's right. Our staff cost, from year one, when we did not capture that in year one, we are capturing it in year two, are increased by, just over $100,000 in looking at capturing that. But it will get better the longer we do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would think at the end of this fiscal year, when we look at, and we may need some help with this in some way, shape, or form, but that we're capturing, and it mainly, I suppose, it's public works. It may fall in, Parks and Rec may have some too, but anything that's costing staff time and so forth, we need to, be gathering it in.
Absolutely. So, I think there are many things we've done over the years that we did not call stormwater that actually benefit this program.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And so
no doubt.
It is a little bit peeling an onion and finding all of those things and quantifying them.
Right. Well, I can't imagine that almost every time Jamie's crews dig a hole in the ground, it's, you could take a pretty good guess that it might have some stormwater implications. Not right? I mean, I don't know anything about the digging or anything else, but one would think. On the 5-year plan, that's a 5-year plan that it stops and you start another 5-year
right.
plan?
Yes.
Do you submit that to anyone, or you just hold on to it in case the federal government or state government comes around to look?
So every, the plan had to be approved, it had to go through public comment, Raleigh had to bless it. And then each year, we do a self-assessment, which has a list of requirements. We submit that. They can, at any point in time, knock on your door and ask for you to do something. But at the end of that 5 years, you will be audited, and every shred of documentation is fair game. And they will, everything. It's a lot of documentation.
So at the end, you will be audited? I
Yes.
thought there was just kind of like IRS
Every
audit, you
5
might be audited.
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years you're gonna get one?
Yes. And you can be short-cycled if they're mad at you. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. I think that's I think that's all I had. Well, I did have a question. Early on, it was in your presentation, Jessica, you mentioned that developers had these responsibilities.
Yes.
Is that developer, is that a certain number of houses or acreage, or is that a developer building one house?
That's associated with that 5,000 square feet of impervious surface, regardless of the type of project.
Gotcha, okay. I believe that's all I had, but thank you. It's a good report, and I think you did a good job of providing a lot of information that the public can go back to, because we've certainly had a lot of misunderstanding as to, why the utility and so forth, and I think you did a good job of setting forth that it's a big job that we don't have a choice but to accomplish it. And it's a good thing. I think most of the public wants to do that and understands that it's best for our community and best for all involved. And so thank you for your hard work on it. And Jamie, thank you to your crew. Pass that along. We understand that they're got some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Anybody else, council? Thanks for good report. On to, and this is for discussion only, but I requested that the town attorney, Steve, just give us a little information on uses of public property, and in particular uses of town square. We have a town square policy, and I think what I'd like to suggest to council is starting with Ron's comments this evening, and we don't have to spend that much time on it. Obviously, spend as much time as you want to. But I'd like to move forward and get to a place where we can look at the current town square policy and see what, if any, changes, additions, and massaging of it we might want to do. Because there's some things came to my attention, which Ron is going to mention, that just raised some concerns that we might need to make sure we know what we're wanting to restrict or not restrict, and just what we can do. So with that, Ron, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I'm going to bore people a little bit. Pardon my voice. I told Josh you might have to read my outline if my voice finishes going away. But I approached this backwards, actually more the way the mayor described it, is what can the town do with its property? And as most people who don't have to sit up here and figure it out think the town can do anything it bloody well pleases. And those of you on the board know that's not the case. But the town can own real property, it can acquire real property, it can dispose of real property. And it can use it, but most of the same things a human can. You can use it for town purposes, your city hall, your fire station. You've got property, you don't want to dispose of it because you might have a future use for it. You can lease it out. You can own it and set it aside for future use because you think you might need it. You can develop it for use by the public, and this is the piece that the town square fits into. And of course, you can give it or sell it at a bargain sale to a nonprofit entity that performs a city function, like privately operated water systems, utility systems. And if you don't need it, it's surplus, you can sell it. The reason I'm approaching this backwards is some of you, if not all of you, have heard of the case of Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona. When I read that opinion, I thought it was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. And I'll give you a very brief overview of that, try to make it fit in a minute. But in Reed versus the town of Gilbert, that case went up, made its way out to the Supreme Court. In the town of Gilbert, Arizona, if you had a sign that you could put out in your front yard that said you were selling peaches, it could be a certain size. If you had one that was a directional sign to a church activity or any activity, it was a different size. And as silly as it might sound, that case went up because a church challenged it and said, why is their sign different? Is that a violation of our freedom of speech because our sign has to be smaller? And the Supreme Court agreed. And the nutshell finding was that if you have an ordinance, and was just a sign ordinance, and you have to read the sign to see if it's legal, then your ordinance is not constitutional. So if you had to read the sign to see if it was selling peaches or giving direction to a church function to tell if it was legal, then that ordinance was unconstitutional. Back to town properties. The town, on that free speech issue, the town's properties can be grouped in three classes. One is and I'll start at the top, the most wide open free speech, and that's traditional public forum. A traditional public forum is where historically people have showed up to vent their frustrations, make their comments, talk to the world about their feelings, and town square is the top of the list. Sidewalks and streets are the next. You can't go out there and say, you're on a town sidewalk, you can't stand there and talk about whatever it is you got to talk about. The next, if you're Googling this, you'll get two different things, and it'll get a little confusing. North Carolina typically refers to the next level as a limited public forum, this being a limited public forum. That the board is to set this up, this is a public forum, anybody can appear, anybody can speak that wants on a topic, but they have to speak on the topic at hand. And then there's non-public public forum. The police department is not a public forum of any fact. It is non-public. You don't have a right to go in there and spew off about anything. But what that does to us, the question I was asked is, what can we or can't we do town square? As a traditional public forum, can demonstrations, peaceful protests, speeches, certainly. You can't stop them. You can regulate those activities if they become a safety issue. There are 3 or 4 topics that are not. You can't incite riots. That's something that freedom of speech doesn't protect for you. What you can't do with it, and I've just grabbed a handful of odd examples, but one is any use of a town's property that benefits an individual or individual entity is a private emolument that you cannot give. So you can't tell me that I can, my staff gets exclusive use of the shelter in the town square for lunch every day. That, we can't do that. Another is an exclusive use of a portion of the property for a limited amount of time. You can do that. You do it at Lake Tomahawk. Is allow you know, whether you want to or not, something else, but I think if you wanted to allow a child's birthday party on the splash pad for 2 hours on a given day exclusively, you could probably do that if you wanted to. Don't know if you want to, but I think you do that legally. You could allow for exclusive use for a limited period of time of the entire town square for a scout activity or some other group. You can do it. You don't have to, but you can. You can allow the use of the town square by individuals or for-profit entities to generate income that they benefit from. That one gets a little questionable.
Will you say that again?
If you can allow a private for-profit entity or individual to use the town square to do something that generates them income. You let me, put my food truck there. That gets a little touchy in a traditional public forum, obviously. The use of the town square by nonprofit entities for fundraising, that may be allowable. That's a little easier to justify than a for-profit. And a thought, and this is bounced around, I'd like to know what people would like to do, then I can answer more specifically. But can the town authorize nonprofits to raise money to benefit the town, but not other nonprofits? Don't have the answer to that question. I think you can allow them all. Can you allow part? That raises a different question about disparity of treatment of similar entities. I have said you can or cannot. I'm going to jump back to two that are a problem. There are, I'll use the only example that's worked its way through some courts and that some of the pundits and academicians have looked at. Does Reed versus Gilbert keep you from prohibiting panhandling? Because I have a freedom of speech, it's a traditional public forum, and you don't know if I'm violating the law to hear what I've got to say. Is that not like reading the sign? So that's, in some states, that's already come before their courts, and they're finding you cannot prohibit panhandling. If you can't prohibit panhandling, doesn't that also stretch out to other sources of income or nonprofits trying to raise money? I think you can draw a line in there, but we don't know where that line is yet. Although the Reed case is 7 years old and still evolving as to how it's applied. I wish I could tell you the answers, but if you, and I think I told Josh before, if you come up with the things that fit in here that you would like to prohibit or allow, let me tackle those specifically, and they will look at if somewhere this is taking some court direction. But there's not a whole lot. The Supreme Court hasn't addressed that question on any other level than that sign case. And different jurisdictions across the country are all interpreting and applying it differently. And so if you had something you wanted to prohibit, you wanted to allow it in a limited way, like I talked about, nonprofits, a nonprofit that's raising money for a town function, fine. Raising money for the Boy Scouts, no. If that is a direction you want to take, I would like to research those specifically, see if anything's happening in other states on those points.
Thank you, Ron. And I think that's helpful for me, and some council members may have some questions for you, but I think that's a good start. And then, sometime I think we just hold a workshop one morning and invite people to come and just give some public input and so forth, and just see where the community stands on things. But let me ask this general question. Regardless of what it might be, and let's use the not-for-profit, that not-for-profit, and they're doing a bake sale, whatever, that's kind of your normal thing or whatever. So regardless of what it is that we have, that we might pose to you and you say, yes, you can allow that, or you can do either. You can restrict or you can allow. Let's just make it that broad. Either way, the town has a right to say, you can't do anything unless you get a permit. Is that true?
To a point, almost. If I want to spout off against the way I think the federal government is handling my tax money, and I want to stand in town square and do it, can you require me to get a permit? I don't think so. Right. If I want to have a group of 10 people show up with me and do it, I think the permit issue gets to the point where in your rational basis approach to it, if it's going to be up to 50 people, we may need you to get a permit. Not that we can deny the permit, but we need to know you're doing it so we can provide for safety.
Well, actually, away from that topic of just public gathering and forum and so forth, for the not-profit that's setting up a bake sale or something, you could say, we're going to allow that, but you got to get a permit.
I think you can.
Yeah. But it's a little gray right now whether you could restrict that for a charity that wants to go, hey, we're going to go do it.
Yeah, can you just say no fundraising of any kind on the town square? I can't say that you can't prohibit it, but I will tell you that's an area that I see at some point, some courts are going to decide whether or not Reed versus Gilbert applies.
I think the question that has come up more just in some discussions that I've heard is about the public charities of some sense, you know,
Yeah.
anyway, not for profit. And the raising of funds, and, you know, can that be restricted, can it not? And if so, then permitting. And I think that's the sort of thing that we'll just have to move through as we get a little more input from the public and see what council feels.
Yeah, I think it's going to be easier for you to prohibit or regulate typical commercial activities. It's going to be a little bit harder when you're panhandling wearing a nicer suit. Basically, if you're a fundraiser and all you're doing is not selling cakes, you're just out there asking for money.
Council, any questions?
Ron, thank you for that explanation. This may be a silly question, but because we close parks at dark and things like that, can we prohibit protests between certain hours or freedom of speech between certain hours, or is something like the town square open at all times?
And again, I used Tomahawk Park as an example a while ago, and that's not really a good parallel. But Town Square is a traditional public forum. I think you'd have a hard time regulating the hours, which I'm gonna get out there and complain about how my taxes are being used. Now, will I be out there at 1 o'clock in the morning, nobody listening to me? Probably not, but if I were to go out there and talk to the dark, unless I disturb the peace or create a safety issue, I think you'd have trouble limiting that.
Now, is that different in Tomahawk or Veterans Park?
Those are parks and not traditional public forums.
Okay.
Sidewalks, streets, parks, and a town square is the epitome of the traditional public forum. Let me throw in a piece that changes things. You can change a town square into something else. You can take a non-public forum and turn it into a limited public forum. You can take a traditional public forum and change it. Town square is no longer open to the public. You can drive by and look at it, but that's it. It's no longer traditional public forum. But as long as we're dealing with town square, the epitome of traditional public forums, we've got to expect the greatest scrutiny of any limitation put on it.
Thank you.
So
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Pam.
Is the point of this conversation to address this one paragraph in our current policy about commercial enterprises? No person shall offer, sell, or solicit for sale or solicit funds for any purpose. Are we saying that this is a potential violation of the law?
No, I didn't even look at the policy and do this
Well,
analysis.
there you go.
But I know we don't allow commercial activity
Right.
on that property.
Right.
And that's not unusual.
Right.
Same as the library, the education room. You can use the education room for just about anything in the world, but you cannot come in there to sell your goods.
Right. It's a little, I think
But that's a little easier because that's not a public forum at all, that's just a room.
right. See, I think the thing that we want to clarify is if you have a not-for-profit there and they're selling stuff, trying to raise money and doing whatever, is that commercial?
Yep, it's going to require some, when you start drawing the lines, you might want to take a little time defining the activity.
Yeah. All right, anybody else? Because this is just a discussion, we'll pick it up, and I think, as you said, Ron, it's easier when we have something specific, you can look into it, and we'll see how that works, and that will come as we meet with the public, so thank you, appreciate it. Josh, consent agenda.
All right, your consent agenda tonight consists of just one item, but multiple things in that one item. Adoption of minutes, those being September 8th, 2022 agenda meeting, September 12th, 2022 regular meeting, September 12th, 2022 closed session meeting, and the revised minutes of August 4th, 2022 closed session meeting minutes, and that's your consent agenda.
Any questions, council, on any of those minutes or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving, a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
All those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you. citizen comments. We have items of new business. Does anyone, if anyone wishes to make a public comment on any of these items of new business, now would be the time to do so. Does any member of the public wish to make comment? All right, hearing none, resolution for demolition of 621 Pagetown Road. Josh,
I
Ron?
can probably handle this as easier than Ron can, but this is an issue, and this was actually brought up in public comment tonight about a structure at 621 Pagetown Road. We've been through the process of speaking with the property owner, notifying the property owner, giving them ample opportunities to remedy the problems. They have failed to do so. So what you have before you tonight is a resolution for the town to go in and demolish the property, and then we will place a lien against that for the cost it's gonna take to get rid of that structure, to clean it up.
Questions for Josh?
I had a few questions about the resolution. This was on last month's agenda, and we struck it from the agenda because I believe we had heard from the property owner.
No, I think the reason it was struck from last month's agenda, and I'll look at Ron, I think there was, we wanted to make sure that we provided both mailed notices to this individual, and I don't know that we did that. I think there was a shortage of either a certified or a first-class mailed notice. I may be misspeaking, but I'm thinking that was the issue.
Yeah, the issue is make sure the property owner did know that this was an action, and so that just followed further service.
So we have not heard from the property owner, no, sir.
Okay. And then, that's okay.
I'm sorry, but they were notified?
I'm sorry?
They were notified?
They've been notified since January of this year, multiple times, over and over again. And they're refusing, from what I understand by reading this and talking with staff, they're pretty much refusing to sign the certified mail. As long as the first-class mail isn't coming back, it's deemed as received.
Any other questions?
I have one small correction to some language that I just for the record to reflect properly. I think that there's a double negative in the fourth from the bottom on the first page. A formal hearing without the property owner not present. I believe that not and without makes it sound like the property owner was present, if I'm reading that correctly.
Should be conduct a formal hearing without the property owner present.
Yeah. So we strike the not.
English teacher would be proud of you. Could I ask a question?
You certainly
Ron?
may.
So Ron, the process, if we adopt this, and whatever the cost ends up being, that's a lien, and then does the town, in order to get paid, do they have to institute a foreclosure of some sort?
The town can.
They can.
I think we've had a couple of these in the past. One, we just sat on the lien until the people decided that wanted to sell, had to pay the lien. We had another one where family members came forward and realized that the family member hadn't taken steps to clean it up, hadn't paid the bill, and arranged to get it paid.
So it's up to we have choices.
You have choices.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for approval of R-22-20.
So moved as amended.
As amended, yes, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Water billing policy, Josh?
So I've got this in front of you this evening, and it's pretty substantial, what we've added to it. I think that part of the impetus of this was to provide staff with some flexibility for customers who are having maybe some type of hardship in order to create some avenues for staff to waive certain fees. Also, we've got in here the ability now for us to do some payment plans if folks need some help on, spreading that out a little bit. Something else, after speaking with some staff at the school of government, we were advised to put some information in here regarding our meters, of those, making sure that folks are aware that meters are the town's property, so anything from the meter back towards our line is ours. They suggested that we put quite a bit of information there about our meters, so we do have that in here as an addition. We also added some information in here where we've got the ability, and we've spoken with MSD, if someone has a water leak that's not necessarily hitting the sewer, then we don't think they need to be responsible for paying that sewer bill either. So we do have that flexibility in here now. If there is some type of leak that's not getting into the sewer system, then we think that those folks should be able to have a waiver of that fee too. I think those are the main portions. I'm looking for Tammy. Did I get most of it? Just with the highlights?
So Josh, review this with the members of the public, but there was always more than one or two sort of situations that came up that you know, bill went out and they hit the late notice period, and then the disconnect came. It came quickly. Let's put it that way. They might put the check in the mail.
Yes.
Yeah. So how does the revised policy address that situation?
So the way the revised policy addresses that is, I think now, whereas before we really didn't have that ability, or I guess really authority to waive those types of fees.
Right.
With the way we've written this now, we have that.
Right.
So if there's, someone calls us and say, hey, this is the issue, something happened to my mail, something happened to this, then we have the ability to say, hey, things happen.
Right.
Well,
so that's on the late fee though.
That
Well,
could be
also be
that could be a reconnect fee.
It could be the disconnect.
That's
or the
correct.
reconnect fee.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so also review what efforts your staff makes when there is going to be a disconnection.
Sure.
To try to contact the customer and so forth.
So, we've been going through a software conversion for about a year. We're getting closer, but with this new software, we're able to do a lot more things that we weren't able to do in the old software. We now have the ability to, we're making calls to people. So if you're on a cutoff list, we make a phone call to you. We also send out notices. There's also, there's been some issues with, some people are getting emailed statements, and there's been some issues with our provider. We're getting that corrected as well. So there's been a lot of different things that we're putting in place now, where I think we're trying to let the folks know before it gets to, till it gets to the end, it's time to cut them off.
Thank you. Council, questions for Josh on the water collection policy?
I have one. So Josh, who's going to make these decisions about who gets a break and who doesn't?
That would be me or Tammy.
Right. So the only thing I'm just wondering about is, I would hate for you all to be in a position where it looked like you were making favorite.
Sure. I understand that.
How do we protect?
So, I'm going to look at Ron out of the corner of my eye and see if he wants to say anything. But, I think from my perspective, us being who we are, and I know that may not always work out in this case, but I think for right now, if someone has never been late, right, and they're late, obviously I think there's a circumstance where we could say, well, hey, you've never been late in 20 years. If you've got a late fee, then maybe we can waive your late fee. Now, if someone is habitually late, then I think that's a different issue, where we point them towards more of a payment plan option that says, hey, if you can't make that whole $100 payment, let's set you up on $25 a month or something. I don't know that I have a good answer for your question, besides being just trying to do the research. So if folks are telling us that, hey, something happened, can you can you tell us what happened, or more of not just, hey, this happened, the dog ate my homework, I didn't pay it, that type of thing. So I think we're going to be a little bit more checking into those situations to see if they actually have a need to have a fee waiver.
Josh, you want to know?
Yeah, you're welcome. Come on up.
There is some stipulations.
Come to the table and sit down,
Sorry.
please.
There is some stipulations in there. So with the late fee and the waiver of the penalties, if you haven't had any late fees or no excess, you haven't been late in the past, you can have one waiver in a 24-month period. And so the staff has the ability to do with that without questions. They have that, they can look back at the records. If we can set up a payment plan, but if you have had a payment plan in the past and you have failed to meet that then you cannot set up a payment plan within a certain amount of time. So there is stipulations, and if you are not in agreement with having the fees waived for some other situation, then it would go to Josh or I, and that would be extreme situations, and it has to be a written appeal process. And it would go to Rebecca, the water billing person first. She would review it, and then she would pass it along to Josh and I to see, what those extenuating circumstances are that caused this situation. So hopefully it wouldn't be, things that happen. But we do realize that with the postal service and things that life happens. People have things come up, so.
Council, any other questions?
I have one. At what point are they referred to or given the options to maybe get assistance from ABCCM or the Evelyn Foundation?
We always provide those those options. If they're, usually if they call in and they're scheduled for disconnection, that's our first go-to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also, I just wanted to mention that we are switching our billing provider, and that was a lot of the confusion with the email. Our past bill printer could not email, they would not notify us that the emails did not come out. We did not know until citizens called us.
Right.
That caused a lot of confusion and problems. We are switching printers, and hopefully that process will become a lot easier, and we will be able to control that in-house, and we will have that control over helping customers. We did not have that with our other billing provider. They would not even provide us with the email addresses for the customers. So we're sort of starting from scratch. So if people were signed up for e-bills before, they're having to start all over now because they wouldn't even tell us anything about it. If you changed one thing on your bill, they would cut you off from e-bills and not notify you.
We've changed it.
We have changed that.
That's in the past.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so people should be getting notifications, and we will be doing mailing and try to let everyone know of all the changes and how they can sign up for various different payment methods, text to pay, call to pay 24/7, all kinds of items that are going to be available.
Right. Thank you. Council, any other questions? All right, and also, if we see it needs to be tweaked, we'll tweak it. So, great, thank you. Council, if there are no other questions, I would entertain a policy to approve the revised water billing policy as presented.
So moved.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. Pagetown Place water line acceptance.
So there's a subdivision that's been going on for a couple of years now off of Pagetown Road, known as Pagetown Place. They are at the time in construction where they would like the town to take over their water system. They have gotten everything installed to engineer standards. State has approved those standards. Looks like there's about 43 lots in this subdivision. And they have sent us the as-built, so we know where everything is located. And at this point, we are ready to take the lines over.
Questions for Josh? The way this works is that you have the plan, and that's a part of the plan, is that when those water lines are ready,
Yes.
meet the standards. and so
Same way
forth.
with streets too.
Correct.
They'll ask for streets too once
Yep.
they get to that point.
Great. Any questions for Josh on this? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the water lines in Pagetown Place into the town water system.
So moved.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? And hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. And Town Council Subcommittee policy discussion.
So what you have in front of you is our first crack at a town council subcommittee policy, I don't know that this is something we've ever done here, at least we haven't since I've been here. A lot of your larger towns do subcommittees. Asheville, for example, has a number of subcommittees that individual council members sit on, ranging from whatever that may be, infrastructure or planning and development, housing, those sorts of things. So what we've got in front of you is kind of our first crack at setting this up. There are a couple of typos in here that I see already right now, so this is not a final product. But I don't know if anyone's had time to look at any of this, but this kind of sets up the purpose of the subcommittee, whatever that would be. Talks about appointments, resigning, administration of the subcommittee, and then you've got chairs and secretaries and vice chairs. There's a portion on conflict of interest specifically. Then it goes into talk about meetings, meetings being open to the public. And then on the very last section, it talks about voting and quorum.
So can somebody fill me in on what triggered this? Like,
That was me.
yeah. So, yeah.
So Josh, you can fill in any blanks here, but this idea came out of the special call meetings we had earlier in the year around infrastructure and our infrastructure needs and how we're going to fund some of those needs, and talking with Josh about kind of next steps after we had those initial meetings. He recommended that this might be a path that we do that to continue the discussion and continue creating a recommendation between staff and a member or two of the town council to then recommend to the full council to consider and vote on.
Yeah. What you had in mind was a little bit more, although this policy provides for it, but we're council members working together with the staff person, 2 members of council.
That's right.
Working together with staff members to work through a project that might be a little more detailed and so forth, and work through it and then bring the recommendation to the full council.
That's right, yeah.
Correct.
And I think, without this in place, I still think, this is something that we could do. I think just I could meet with 2 council members in my office and we can have those discussions. I don't think, it doesn't have to be formalized, so to speak, if you don't want it to be.
Right. It's a tool to have in place. It seems to me it might be more, the record keeping is a little puzzlement to me, because if these meetings are supposed to be public, sometimes that's the reason only 2 council members meet with staff, because they don't know, we're trying to find out what's going on.
That's correct.
It's not necessarily something that's the reason you don't have 3 and have a public meeting.
That's right.
And so that's the decision that council needs to make in forming these, because if you did it under this policy and you just had 2 council members, then you're saying you're going to have a public meeting to discuss it.
Right.
So that would come with its own, but there's a place for that if it's something that the entire council doesn't need to be involved with, but you want to have a public meeting and let the public come and make comment.
Yeah, and I don't know, honestly, in reading the policy, I was surprised that we were looking at public meetings, and not that I'm opposed to that at all, but my understanding is that the city of Asheville, I may be wrong about this, that their special committees are not public.
I think they are public.
They are public,
but yes, but they are.
Okay.
So, Doug, would you like to, Councilmember Hay, would you like to, we've had a discussion on it, you'd like to think about it, let council think about it and look at it to adopt at a future meeting, next month? I mean, you could welcome to make a motion for approval if you want to, but that's up to you.
I think we should probably fix some typos before we do that, but I did have one kind of question. There was nothing in here about dissolving the committee or terminating the committee, and part of what where this came from was looking at really a specific project that would not be an ongoing committee, or maybe not have ongoing needs. So, I think that maybe that would be a new section to add to the policy here.
That's a good point. So you want to maybe finalize it and have it on the agenda?
Yeah, if we could roll it over for next month, I think
that'd be fine. Does that sound good, council?
And although the public will disagree with me on this, I think you want to think about that requirement that it be an open meeting. I think you want such committee, if it wants public input on a point, to be allowed to call it a public meeting. But part of the benefit of it, of having two members and not being a regular open meeting, you don't have that 40 hours notice that you got to post on the bulletin board. Gives you a little more flexibility, and you're more likely to be sitting there handling out technical details rather than getting information and input from the public. But I think as a practical tool, that if it's not a mandatory open meeting, it's going to be a more workable beast.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
So we just want to make sure we capture that appropriately in the policy. So
That
maybe
it
we'll
may or may
maybe we'll form a subcommittee with Councilmember Hay on it to work with somebody. It's good, thank you though. It's good, it's a good discussion. So we'll move it forward to the November.
That's right, I think
November
maybe
meeting.
make some revisions and then
Yeah.
present it to us
Right,
next
thank
year.
you, thank you for bringing it up initially. Mike Boulevard, Market Road, crossing update.
I'm gonna let Jessica come up and do this one.
All right, so we've been working on our bike boulevard, and originally, when it was scoped as bike infrastructure, the crossing was not going to be very expensive for Montreat Road, and that's because ADA rules do not apply when you are doing only bicycles, that they are triggered when you are doing pedestrian improvements. So we got out there, we started looking around, and we determined that it would make the most sense to add the pedestrian infrastructure to it as well, so it could service both bikes and people walking. However, the sidewalks are not ADA, and there are a variety of grade issues that need to be solved. So it is more expensive when we start dealing with sidewalks. And so it's about $32,000 more expensive than we initially budgeted for that crossing to make it workable for both pedestrians and cyclists. If we do not do the pedestrian part right now, it doesn't preclude us from adding it in the next fiscal year. You can just move forward with the bike first and then add the pedestrian later. But we could do it all at once as well.
Well, can we afford to do it all at once?
So what we'll need to do, I mean, we can afford it, we just need to bring back, if council approves this, we'll need to bring back a budget amendment next month.
All right, so we.
Or
there's a means
subsequent
for it.
month.
So you said $32,000 more?
Mm-hmm.
So what does that make the total?
So the total project is $32,000 with the bike signal only. So it almost doubles the project cost.
32, sounds like it does double.
It does.
So we had 52,000 in our statement.
Yeah.
So we already have some money allocated. It's going to be that much more.
I see.
Yeah.
We're getting no money for this
No.
from anybody.
Mm-mm.
Either
Well-
way, it's gonna have the flashing lights like, no?
No.
It won't if you don't do the pedestrian crossing.
Okay.
Would
So
it
the
with
other-
the pedestrian crossing?
The pedestrians, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
Would it have the flashing lights with the pedestrian?
Yes.
Yeah.
My thinking when I heard, I guess I spoke with Josh about it, is, and all the other thing's the location of it.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the location of let's say, for discussion purposes, that council is very interested in this being a pedestrian crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it going to be located?
So it's Laurel Circle at
Right.
the church.
Right.
And initially, that was the route that was identified in the original plan. And you have a curb cut from the driveway, and then you have the road. So for the bicycles, it was like, all right, we'll just keep on going with some safety improvements. But it doesn't rise to ADA.
So it seems to me, obviously don't know anything about traffic, but that would calm traffic there. What do you think, Chief? Crossing going over Montreat Road right there, you'd hope so. You don't need to answer.
It will have a variety of forewarning lights.
You would think so. You'd think it has something.
I would hope so. It would have additional, there are these there's the crossing here, but then you start signaling up above it. So there would be plenty of warning for traffic to slow as they
A lot of
approach.
folks already crossing Mondrick Road from Laurel Circle.
They do, and we do get a request for pedestrian crossings. It just wasn't in the original scope because it was a bike project.
All right.
I mean, there's 2 preschools, there's 2 churches, there's the farmer's market.
Yeah.
This project connects the Greenway and the
That's right.
Tomahawk.
Josh, there's ways to find money in the budget for this if we decide to proceed.
Well, when I say budget amendment, I mean pulling from fund balance.
Okay, well.
I mean, you know, depending, if
But
we
we
push.
have room in that.
Yes,
Okay.
we can do that. You know, you can always push this project later on until this fiscal year and see what we've got left over, but.
Roll the dice and see if anybody can get somebody to come and do it.
Well, that's
Maybe
the
next
yeah.
fiscal
No,
year.
no.
That's the issue after you approve it.
Okay, council, any other questions for Jessica or Josh on this?
No.
What is your pleasure?
I'm not crazy about doing one part and then later doing the second.
I'm not either.
So, just a
I'd
motion.
move to proceed with this with pedestrian and bike crossing.
Great, pedestrian and bike crossing, with a budget amendment to be presented to council
right.
next, and could be, we might get to find the extra $32,000 elsewhere, but if not, council is comfortable with allocating, that's a pretty minuscule amount of fund balance. But
Well, that's when
what-
we have a bake sale on Town Square.
Any comments or questions? We have a motion to make this a bike and pedestrian crossing. If there are no other comments or questions, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And I can't even remember what I told you F and G was, but I know it's about
One is,
personnel issues. and-
Part-time employees.
I remember the
So, I'll start out with F. So the F, the item we added was part-time employees and the COLA raise. So in July, the full-time employees got 6%. You know, the part-time employees aren't entitled to all the benefits that the full-time employees are. They don't always get COLA, and in fact, they didn't this year. So I've spoken with a few council members regarding the COLAs for part-time employees. My suggestion to council was if we're gonna do it for some of them, we just do it for everybody that's part-time employees. Across the board, that would be fire department, golf course, pool, police, garden, everybody that's part-time employee would get this. What you would be looking at in a budget impact for a fiscal year right now would be $21,170. Being that we're in October, that amount is gonna be almost $15,900 for the rest of this fiscal year to do that for part-time employees, to give them a 6% COLA increase.
So you're not thinking of going retroactive to when the others got this?
I was not, no.
Okay, just wanted to understand.
Okay, that would be council's pleasure if that's what you wanted to do, but as presented. Council?
my question was, is it feasible?
Yeah, we just did a budget for 32,000. You're gonna do another one for in the grand scheme of things, when you look at a almost $10 million general fund budget, that's not a lot of money out of that. That's not a lot of money to hit, is, $15,000.
How many employees are we talking about?
Oh, you're probably talking about, if you add them all up, probably at least 40 to 50 altogether.
And is there currently any process for merit-based raises for these part-time employees?
We don't have merit-based raises for anybody right now.
Okay.
It's just COLA.
Then it makes sense to me too.
Do you know when the last COLA adjustment for part-time employees was?
It's been a while.
I don't know, council member Christie. I can get you that number, but I don't know that right now.
I know it's not been in the last 2-3 years.
What do you think, council?
I'm not saying I'm against it, I just wonder if this is one of those issues that will get addressed in our salary study that we currently have underway. Like what should part-time position salaries be? Are we jumping the gun if we're gonna have that soon?
Well, we jumped the gun, if you're looking at it that way, we jumped the gun by giving everybody 6%. Because we didn't have a salary study.
That is true.
Exactly.
So I don't think that's, you're looking at apples and apples if you look at that. So, council?
I mean, roughly right now, across the board, we pay about $350,000 a year in part-time salaries.
I'll just go ahead and say that I know my recommendation would be to go ahead and give them the 6% COLA.
You want to make that in the form of a motion?
Yeah, a motion.
Right. We have a motion from Councilmember Patillo that part-time employees receive a 6% COLA increase. And as it stands, that is not retroactive to the beginning of the budget year. Is that good for you?
Yes.
Okay. So that's the motion on before council. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. And then G, I believe this is you, Josh.
Okay, G is going to be 2 individual employees that are, that have agreed to move from Public Works to sanitation. We've had some shortages on sanitation, so we really need to have that department to be as full as possible. We have 2 employees, Riley Ogle, who also is in Public Works and works for Mr. Matthews, and then Alden Conley also is in Public Works. We have told them both, if they would be willing to go to sanitation, we would raise their pay to $18 an hour. For both of these employees, you are looking at, let's see, Mr. Riley Ogle would go from $33,342 to $37,440. And Mr. Alden Conley would go from $34,174 to $37,440.
Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
And we've spoken about this, I think, briefly. So any questions, any comments on that? Go ahead.
Is that salary in line with the other sanitation workers?
It's really close, if not a little bit less, because the other guys are drivers, so they get paid a little bit more.
Okay.
Drivers have to have CDL.
And they have to have CDLs.
Okay.
So, and just to remind the public that that's where we are, we're doing a salary study and wage study and hoping to get a handle on it, but we have to pay people to do the services, take care of the services that the public demands, and it would be more expensive if we were using an outside vendor because they're gonna pay people what it takes to get it done. So that's the world we're living in now as far as our labor shortage. But on top of that, we want to pay if we weren't paying them fairly to start with, to do that very difficult and demanding work, that's what we would want anyway. And so we want to pay folks doing these jobs what they deserve and commensurate with what their peers are receiving in our area. So do we have a motion? Did I get a motion on this? I don't believe I did I? All those in favor of the pay increases for those Pagetown employees? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Do I have a motion then for the pay increases for the 2 employees that Josh referenced to us earlier? Josh, the names?
You have Alden Conley and Riley Ogle.
And that their per hour be increased to
$18 an hour.
Immediately so that they can join the solid waste pickup. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Great, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And opposed, no. And we are, to remind the public, we're jumping through the hoops of bringing any salary wage adjustment before the public. That's not really required. It is in some cases, it isn't in some cases. And not to get out in the weeds too much, but the town manager and the town finance director have authority to do these things, and the public might have a hard time finding out about it. This one probably in particular, maybe both of these you could have done by moving, and it didn't need to come. About 3 or 4 years ago, and the time kind of moves by quickly, but we made a policy. We said after the budget is set, after we have our budget ordinance. Any changes in anyone's salary, wages, or whatever, it will be part of the public record, and so that's what we're doing this evening. So, I believe we're done. Mr. Sneed, do you have anything?
I have nothing to add.
Great. You had a chance to talk tonight, that was good.
Yeah, I'd rather talk.
Josh, do you have
Just
anything?
a few things, Mr. Mayor. So just a reminder, our volunteer luncheon is this Thursday at 12 o'clock over at the fire department in the training, or in the bays. We'll move out the fire trucks, put some tables in, make it look real good for the volunteers, come over and have something to eat. Our Citizens Academy graduation is going to be October 17th at around 5:30. There is a session on that night, but as soon as that session's done, graduation will take place. Will that be here?
It's at,
It'll be at public safety as well, excuse me.
So the graduation's not here, but up there,
right, in the training room.
at 5:30.
Ish.
Ish.
Yes. And then, just a reminder, we won't have another meeting before this, but town offices will be closed November 11th for Veterans Day.
Right. Council, anybody have anything this evening?
I just remind people that early voting starts October 20th. It's at a variety of locations around Buncombe County, but one of them is the Black Mountain Library. And if you're not registered to vote, you can register right there at early voting, and elections matter.
Thank you, Councilmember King. Anybody?
I want to just echo the recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day. At Warren Wilson, the archaeology department has, there's evidence that there were people living along Swanoa River, indigenous people, more than 10,000 years ago, which gives a little bit of context to our concept of history and how forgotten that is. I think it's important. And then also, today I noticed, today is World Mental Health Day, which is worth mentioning as a tremendous problem in our communities, and it's worthy of mentioning and keeping that on our radar.
Thank you, Councilmember Christie.
This was called out during the stormwater presentation, but Saturday we're giving away trees, right, at 9 a.m.
Yes.
At Public Works.
Just the parking lot north of Public Works, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
You good?
Yeah, Bill stole my mental health day.
It's
okay.
Sorry.
It's all good.
Next time I'll start with you and go down. Well, I'll add to Mental Health Day, and that I've spoken with Josh about this a few times, and for council members in particular, because you interface with the public. And Josh has had some sessions, well, this is actually a different topic, I don't know. Some of our department heads do this for a living, so they know it. But I think it would be helpful, and we can do this in an open session, obviously a public meeting if we're all together, but have a workshop. We have some folks at the county level that, that do this. That they're part of county government and work in the mental health area, and helpful for council members to know something about the environment that we work in, and working with the public, and identifying and knowing when there are situations that we might want to refer to the appropriate parties, and just have a little bit better handle on that, because it is what it is. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. We are planning on a session, if the council so approves, to go into closed session to talk about a matter with the town attorney, legal matters, and that's under North Carolina General Statutes under Section 143. You can see it in your agenda. But before we take a vote, thank you for being here. Have a nice evening. And I'd entertain a motion, council going to closed session to discuss matters with the town attorney.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you.